Hello juniors, welcome back to Computer Systems and Programming. For this video, we're going to be going over conditional statements and how we make them in Python using the actual syntax that we'll be using while coding. So the first thing you're going to do, make sure that you make your project folder. So you go File, New, PyDev Project, and then you can just name it Conditional. Then you can make a File, New Module, and you'll name this one Conditional Practice. So with this is what we'll be going over this video, and we'll kind of be going over the syntax of how you use conditional statements and what they're used for. So at cohort we talked about the concept of conditionals and using if and else statements to control what a program does. And then for this, now we'll be looking at how you actually can do that in programming. So this is actually fairly simple. It uses the logic from the comparison operators and the logical operators, and then just adds a couple things to it. So the first thing we can do, let's just make a variable x equals 0. And now we can say to the program, if parentheses x equals 1, then we want the program to print something. I don't know, something. So now what's this saying is that we made this variable, and then on line 19 it's saying if x equals 1, so we use our comparison operator. We're comparing x to 1. It finds out it's not true, so then it skips it. If it was true, so if we change this to a 0, it will say if x equals 0, which this comes back true. So if true, then it will print something. So if we were to run this, we can do run as Python run. It'll print something because x in fact does equal 0. If I change this and then I run it again, nothing is printed because x does not equal 1. X equals 0. So that's how a basic if statement works. That's just a plain if. You can also have multiple if statements. So you can have if x equals 0, because remember, two equal signs compare something. Then we can write print sum. Then we can say else if x equals 1, then print thing. So now, when we run this program, it will only do one of these things. It can only do this one or this one. So, if we run this, it's going to only print sum, because if x equals 0, then print sum. Otherwise, if x equals 1, and we run this, then it's going to print, it's going to print something from this first one, and then it's going to print thing because it's going to this second one. So this is like an order. It tries to do this one. If it can't, then it goes to the next one, and it keeps going down and down until it finds the one that it can do. You can also add this thing called else. So else, if it equals anything else, or it doesn't meet any of these conditions, then print NA. So now, if we run this again, it should print, let's change this, so let's make it equal 2. So it should print nothing, NA, because first it tries to print sum, and it's like does x equal 0? No, so I go on to the next one. Does x equal 1? No, so I go on to the next one. And then this catches everything. So if it doesn't meet any of the conditions, then it goes to this. So you can also add as many elifs as you want. So elif x equals 2. Or you can do, after that, you can do elif x equals, remember to use two equal signs, x equals 3. And then print. So you can have as many of these elifs as you want, but it's going to do the same thing. It's going to check 1, and it's going to check 2, and it's going to check 3, and it's going to go down until else. You'll notice though, if it doesn't have anything after it, it won't do anything. So it will only do this. If it's not true, then it's going to skip it. If it is true, then it'll do it. Now, if I just have 2 if statements like this, it's going to check if it can do this one, and it's going to check if it can do this one, regardless of what this one prints out. So if we change these both to 0, when we run this, it's going to check, does x equal 0? Okay, print something. Okay, now it's going to check again. Does x equal 0? Okay, print some. So it's going to print the same thing, even though these are right after each other. The only time it will only check 1 is if you put an elif there. So the elifs basically mean only one of these 2 things can happen. A bunch of ifs mean that all of these could possibly happen, or none of them can happen. It has nothing to do with each other. But this means that if this one's true, then this one won't print. So, for example, these both equal 0, but it only prints something, because once it finds out that this is true, it skips past everything else. If you wanted to check both of these, then you just get rid of that elif, and then boom, it does both of them. So that's basically it. You have those 3 basic things: if, elif, and else. And remember, it always has the syntax of if conditional statement. That's where that word conditional statement is. And then colon, not a semicolon, colon. And then whatever you want it to do. Same with elif. You do condition, then task. Else does not need the condition. It will just catch everything else. But notice that for when I'm writing this out, I call this the semicolon, or the colon, I call it a then. So I say if conditional statement, then do this. Else, if this is true, then do this. Else, nothing else is true, nothing of the above is true, then do this. Additionally, you don't need any elifs. You can just do it like this. So there's many different combinations you can make, but normally you just do an if, or then an if and an else, or an if and a bunch of elifs and an else. It really depends on what you're trying to do, but it really changes. Inside of this, you can put any comparison or logical operator. So you can say if x equals 0, and x equals 1. So now x has to equal 0 and 1, which we know is impossible. But if it was, only while both were true can this print statement happen. So just know you can use any comparison operators. You can use the less than, that's the greater than, less than or equal to, just greater than or less than. Any of those combinations work, but you just figure out this condition and then you'll see if it's true or not. So once you kind of understand this, you can feel free to look up more examples on the internet. There are tons of if conditionals, and you can just look up and it kind of explains to you. So if condition, if it's true, then it does the if body. If it's false, then it's going to do the else body. So if this part didn't make sense to you as text, then you can feel free to go onto the internet and just look up different ways of visualizing it. If condition 1 is true, then do statement 1. If condition 2 is true, then do the second statement. So you can feel free to look at many of these as you want. Look, and here even has some Python examples. Once you get a grasp on conditional statements, you can head on over to Canvas and you'll do the conditional statements drill and the debug, and you'll submit them both as a link to your GitHub repository. Here are the drills and the debug, and the activity prompts are linked in here, and they'll tell you exactly what to do. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, but that will be all, juniors.